Welcome to today's Business Owners Series. We're here to talk about how to improve your business's productivity. And we're really glad that you were able to join us today. And we're eager to tell you a little bit about ourselves. And then we're going to also get into performance improvement and what we do and how we do it, and give you some education and some knowledge, and hopefully pique your interest so that we can talk about how we might be able to help you into the future. We're going to get into a few housekeeping items just ahead of as we dive into this session. This presentation is being recorded, and a link will be emailed to you after this event. It'll be a few days. We do intend to try and save some time for a Q&A period at the end of the webinar. So we certainly encourage you to submit any questions that you have about the presentation and the content throughout the time that we're speaking. You can use that Q&A button in the bottom middle part of your screen to submit a question. And thanks to those that have already submitted questions, we'll hope to get to those as well. And we will definitely do our best to get to as many questions as we can today. So looking forward to a good discussion. If your question doesn't get answered because it's such a good topic and there's so much interest, we're definitely interested to follow up with you if you have any questions that we can address later. So we're definitely open to having that conversation as well. So we'll turn to giving you a bit of an introduction to our team members. My name is Nicole Asselin. I am a partner in the management consulting practice based out of Edmonton, and I do a lot of work with our private enterprise clients of all different shapes and sizes in different industries. And so I deliver management consulting services. So that means everything from strategy and business planning and operational implementation and things like that, to dealing with people and change management, and then of course performance improvement. And so all of these pieces really fit together nicely. And so that's kind of my background. And I do a lot of work in our real estate and construction clients, as well as food and beverage recently. But really anywhere where there's management or operational challenges is where I tend to find myself. So I'm going to pass it over to Robert to introduce himself.
Thanks, Nicole. Appreciate it. So my name is Robert Trumper. I'm the senior manager in our performance improvement practice, based out of Calgary here, but responsible for the prairies and a bigger area. My background is mostly kind of working with private industry, but also public sector clients. Kind of a variety of clients all across different sectors. Implementing improvements, continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, and really kind of driving mindsets, but also improvements really to the bottom line, and improvements that organizations can really see and capture in their financial results. Jay, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Robert. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jay Fan. I'm a partner with MMP based in BC, and leads our BC performance improvement practice, and also at the same time supporting Robert for Perry as well. My background, I have 20 plus years experience in performance improvement, very similar to Nicole, that ranging from strategy, growth planning, to looking to your footprint of your operations, expansion to different markets, as well as operational improvement in your processes, your layout, your inventory management, as well as a marketing and fulfillment process, logistics, transportation as well. Definitely appreciate time to talk to you and share our experience. So I'll hand over back to Nicole.
Thanks, Jay. So that's our team, and we're just the three people that are here today. It is important just to let you know that we are a broad team, a much bigger team than just the three of us, and we do certainly service all the areas within Canada. So I did have a peek at the invitation attendees, and so there's a lot of you from all over the country, and so we're really grateful that you joined us today. And there's definitely people in your own regions that can help you, and we're happy to be a conduit into those regions. So with that, we'll move into the agenda. And so just to give you a sense of what we're aiming to accomplish today, we really want to get into some of the fundamentals of your business and how to improve your performance. We want to be able to discuss some approaches to improve that productivity and reduce costs, so that really you can be confident in the business, that your business is going to be running as efficiently as possible. And so a lot of these topics we aim, of course, to be timely with what's going on around you. And so we certainly want to start with a bit of a conversation about the business climate. Then we want to talk to understanding performance improvement methods. So how do we go about this, and what are some effective strategies for improving efficiency? Then we want to get into some pretty key concepts around value add and non-value add, having some discussion around problem identification and root cause analysis, and then rounding out that concept piece with performance measurements. We do want to give you some examples in terms of, what the kinds of work that we've done and how it might be relevant to your industry or to your business. So we'll walk you through a few case studies. And then we wrap it up with giving you an overview of our methodology so you can understand and how we can support you. So what does this look like if we get to work together in doing this? And that's really it. And then we hope to have a good amount of time to discuss some questions of yours. Before we get started, we wanted to do a bit of a survey. The idea here is really so that we can understand a little bit more about you and about what some of your challenges are, so we can try and weave in some of that that context into some of the examples we might provide or into some of the answers we give later. So the question that we have today for you is, well, the first one is, what is the biggest constraint to improving your business? So sort of what's the thing that's really getting in your way the most? So we'll give you a few seconds to answer this, and I'll walk through the responses. So the first one is, are the staffing issues? Number two is maybe you're growing too quickly, or perhaps you're too busy to be able to improve, or maybe you don't know where to start. Or maybe number five, you don't have the knowledge internally to be able to undertake this kind of work. And maybe there's something else. So if you could take a few seconds, and we have a facilitator who is helping us to determine when most responses have been provided. Maybe if it's looking like it's good, we're getting there, I'm told. There's magic happening in the background. I'm grateful I'm glad that there's some good response rates. Sounds like we're about 80% there. Just a few more seconds, and then we'll close it out. Hopefully you don't have to, hopefully you're not torn between picking between all five of them. All right. So the results are in, and there's a pretty, the top two pieces that seem to really be challenging for folks on the webinar today is dealing with staff issues. And given the current climate, I can't say I'm really entirely shocked to see that. And then also just being too busy to be able to improve. So both are coming in the 30% range, and then followed by not really sure where to start. And then having the knowledge internally on how to do this. So, I think that those are fairly common issues with the majority of the clients that I'm talking with these days, certainly around staffing and being just too busy. There's just too much to do, and it's certainly tied to the staffing issues. But thank you very much for taking a moment to review that survey. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Robert to talk through the business climate.
Excellent. Thanks, Nicole. Appreciate that. Yeah, so we appreciate everyone taking the time to fill out that survey. It's helpful for us to give us some context as we move through the presentation and talk about other items around what are some of the challenges that people are facing. So we're going to talk a little bit about the current business climate right now. And I think a lot of what I'm going to say is probably not going to shock anyone or stun anyone, because I'm sure you're all seeing these impacts, but just want to kind of level set this. So top of my list was staffing issues. It's what we tend to hear from our clients and tend to hear from folks that it's difficult to find qualified folks and to find the right qualified folks in your industry. So obviously there are some opportunities within performance improvement to drive improvement in your business from that standpoint. We obviously, I think we all are getting tired of the pandemic, or at the point where we'd like this to end. Nobody knows exactly when that's going to be or where that's at, but that's obviously having significant impacts on business from a whole bunch of aspects. The other thing that we've been seeing a lot is inflation. I think as of last week, I think the inflation rate in Canada is at 5.1%, if I'm not mistaken, which is some of the highest rates that we've seen since the mid-90s. Obviously driving costs in your business and driving costs in general to higher rates. Then there's supply chain, of course. So I think everyone in all aspects of their business are facing some kind of supply chain constraints or supply chain issues, whether that comes from ordering overseas or other potential supply chain issues that you're facing. I think all businesses are impacted by that in some form or another. And so I think the kind of connection there is, well, there might be external factors that are affecting your supply chain. What can we do internally to try to drive that, to benefit that, to stabilize that as much as possible from that standpoint? And then obviously, even in the last day or two, there's been some world events that are going to have impacts on the world economy and impacts on the world. So obviously, we're still going to be keeping an eye on those to see what impacts those have and what that looks like. And then the other thing that we're noticing in particular is that there's a lot of merger and acquisition activity going on, and we're seeing that activity drastically increasing, along with the valuation multiples increasing as well when it comes to those activities. And so the reason I bring that up, that might seem like an odd topic to bring up in performance improvement, but the reason I bring that up is because what we're also seeing is private equity companies reaching out to us and looking to get our input in operational due diligence, or looking to get us to do operational improvement or performance improvement in organizations where that merger acquisition has taken place. And so one of those things that if that's your business and your business is getting close to that point or in that market, that there may be an opportunity for you to be able to do that performance improvement prior to that. And that then drives the value to yourself and obviously the multiplier and so forth, making that value come right back to you rather than into the private equity companies or other organizations from that standpoint. So there's some linkages there, but that's just kind of a high level on the current business climate. So from a performance improvement standpoint, so you may have heard terms like Lean or Six Sigma, or sometimes you might have heard terms like Lean and Six Sigma combined together. And really, don't get too worried about these terms or about these concepts. They are quite simple, and really they're just methodologies on what we use to improve and on the basis that we use to drive improvement. So Six Sigma at a really high level is a methodology looking at how we can drive improvement to reduce defects, reduce errors, and really kind of have that defect and error rate under control. Lean, on the other hand, is a methodology that really looks to drive and eliminate waste out of an organization. So where that waste exists and how we can identify that waste, and then how we can ultimately just relentlessly kind of drive that waste out of the organization and eliminate that waste. And there might be a stigma that these methodologies only work in manufacturing environments or typical environments like that. We have seen trends over the past even 10 to 15 years, even longer, of these methodologies starting to move into other organizations. There's a significant pickup in healthcare from a Lean standpoint. We see applications in oil and gas. We see applications in agriculture. We see applications in construction. And the list kind of keeps going. Really, the reality of it is that these methodologies work in every environment, and the tools work in every environment, regardless of the process that we're looking at, or regardless of the industry that we're looking at from that standpoint. So they really are agnostic tools to be able to apply wherever we see a process. And that process could be more manufacturing based and floor and looking at nuts and bolts, and it could be more paper based from the standpoint of finance processes or human resources processes. It really can span all kinds of different levels and all kinds of different layers within organizations. So some things that we like to think about when first starting and really looking at things. So what I want everyone to think about is if you're considering this work is what benefit and value are you going to get out of doing this work? What are you trying to drive? Are you trying to reduce cost? Are you trying to increase revenue? Are you trying to build capacity in the business so that there's opportunity to grow? Are there space constraints in your business? You know, I talked about mergers and acquisitions previously. Is that a path that you want to go? Are you an owner of a business that maybe is finding that you're spending too much time in that business and looking to find ways to ensure that the business can operate a little bit more on its own? All these kind of things are things that you need to look at when starting this to really be able to decide the path that you're going to move forward and what that goal is in the end that you're really going to strive towards and really strive to achieve by taking on these initiatives. The next one really is, this is lean, and lean concepts are meant to be done with and for frontline folks. So working with those people that are doing the work, working with those people that see the work on a daily basis. I can assure you that every organization I've ever been in, that those processes that are written in manuals or that are documented somewhere are not necessarily always the process that occurs, because someone working on the front line has found a better, quicker, easier way or a workaround. And so really understanding and working with those folks and seeing those folks and being there when the work happens really gives insight into what's occurring that you never get in a boardroom or in a meeting room or somewhere else for that matter. And so really important to be able to do that even from the onset. Then metrics, and we're going to talk about performance measures and metrics a little bit later on in the presentation, but I really wanted to touch on this because metrics are critical. Without metrics and without measuring your process, there is no opportunity for improvement because you don't know if you've improved. So those metrics and being able to measure something allows us to be able to see what improved, how much it improved, and then also learn from that so we can then figure out what we need to do next time to be able to improve more. What it also does is it also tells us, are we pulling the right levers when we actually are doing things? Are we adjusting the right things to drive the right measurement? Or on the flip side, do we actually measure the right things? Are we measuring those right critical things that are really important to our business, and are we driving those? So again, measuring things really critically important. Value add and non-value add are another aspect that I'm going to talk about in the next couple slides here, because when we start to look at value add, non-value add, we really want to start to look at that value add component from the customer's eyes and from the way the customer looks at things. So really looking at it, really, if you kind of boil it down, is if you looked at every step and you looked at what was going on in your process and kind of broke it out, would the customer be willing to pay for all those steps? Would the customer be willing to pay for all that if you broke that down in a bill for them? And when you start to look at things a little bit differently that way, we can start to assign what we call value add or non-value add components to that. And that really brings light to where some opportunity lies within process that we'll talk about in just a little bit. And then ultimately rapid improvement in cycles, which are just, taking a problem, identifying that problem, starting to do some root cause analysis on that problem, and then starting to implement solutions. And the key behind this is learning. We use a term in lean and in performance improvement, which is called fail fast. And that might scare people, that word fail, but the reality is that if we fail fast, we can learn quickly, we can adapt, and then we can do something different next time. And rather than, sometimes when we fail, we revert back. We go back to what we were doing previously. The intent here is, if we're gonna fail, let's fail fast, and then let's do something different to correct that and fix that and get on that better track and find that better process and learn from that. Because what we learn by actually being where the process is happening, that's where we gain the most value. That's where we gain the most insight. And that's where we're able to really start to see whether things are going to work, not going to work. And if they're not going to work, why they're not going to work. and then start to learn and adapt from that as well. So moving on with that, we always, it's always that question of how do you identify these opportunities? And I'm going to get into some more specific tools, but I wanted to address this at a high level. And so we always generally start with things like process mapping. Everyone's probably seen some type of process map in your organization or throughout your time. Generally, it's usually Post-it notes or some kind of boxes, maybe done on a computer, where you've labeled different steps and you've got steps, and you might have broken it out by department, or you might have broken it out by who's doing the work, and that kind of lays out your process. Well, what we like to do is really take that one step forward. So that process map outlines who's doing what, and kind of at a high, not a high level, more detailed level, what's happening within that process. But what we like to do is then take that to what we call a value stream map. And that value stream map then takes that process and starts to add metrics to it, and starts to add more information to it that allows us to be able to see opportunities in our process, that allows us to be able to see where there's an opportunity to do something different, where there might be issues that are hidden, and allows us to start to see those things in a different way that we maybe never have looked at it previously. I will share an example of what that looks like here shortly. So again, this whole concept of lean improvement, what does this look like, and what does this really look like in a real process? So you heard me talk earlier about value add, non-value add activities. So in every process is made up of value add and non-value added activities. That's a given and kind of a standard. And so if we look at this top bar graph, you can see that the original process is broken up into value add, non-value added activities. And so the orange being non-value added and the green being, the orange being non-value added and the green being value added activities. And you can see that there's large chunks of non-value added activities, which is very typical of what we see when we look at processes kind of across all industries. And so what we tend to see in traditional improvement, when people tend to take a traditional approach, is they really start to look at those value added tasks. So they look at the task of what someone is physically doing and try to make that quicker, try to make that faster, try to make that easier, try to automate that potentially. And while all those things can actually benefit your process and can have value to your process, the impact and value on doing things like that is much lower. And the challenge with it is it's expensive, it can be time consuming, it can be difficult from a change management standpoint. It's really difficult because you're changing the way people work, and you're changing the way they do their job, and all those kinds of things. And so it can get really difficult. And so that from that lean standpoint, what we like to look at is really those non-value added activities. How can we target and reduce those non-value added activities? And when we do that, we can see that by having kind of the same level of improvement, or the same percentage of improvement, we see a much greater improvement in the entire process. The challenge being is that those non-value added activities hide in the process, and they hide in different parts of the process. And so the real key and challenge becomes finding those and digging those out of the process. And that's where, if you look in the bottom left hand of this slide, you'll see that we've identified the 8 wastes. And so when we look at process, we start to look at it from this lens of where's waste and how do we identify this waste. And so defects, overproduction, waiting time, non-utilized talent, transportation, inventory motion, and extra processing are all wastes. And these wastes tend to hide between process steps. And so being able to identify that waste and then being able to target it to say, we're going to improve it, we're going to remove it, we're going to do something with this waste to then drive it out of our business, is really what we're looking at, and really what we want to focus on from a lean improvement standpoint. So I said earlier, I was going to share an example of what a value stream map looks like. This is a very simplistic value stream map, but it will get across the point. You can see here that rather than just a typical process map, a value stream map tends to be a little bit more of a linear flow from left to right. We start off by identifying information flows. So how information moves in and around your business, who gets that information, how forecasting occurs, how planning, budgeting occurs, who's getting that information, when do they get that information, are they getting that information when they need to get that information, and are they getting the right information? Is there other information that at different process steps might help or benefit that process? Then at each process step, we start to measure different information. So things like cycle time, uptime, number of shifts, number of people within the process, number of available work time that exists within that process. We even start to measure inventory between process steps. And again, you know, when we use the word inventory, I think people automatically go to, well, that's a manufacturing, or in manufacturing, you're going to have inventory. That inventory is just a word, and that inventory can be applied to all kinds of things. It could be applied to sheets of paper, could be applied to, if we're in more of a healthcare setting, like people. That inventory can be applied to a whole lot of different things in your organization. It's really just what's in between each task, or what's sitting in between each task. And in this situation right here, we can see that we have a production lead time of 14 days and processing time on each step of only about 585 seconds. Now I can probably see eyes rolling and probably imagine that people are saying, well, that's unrealistic, or that doesn't happen. I can tell you from experience that this is not uncommon, and this does occur. And so then it's a matter of looking at that difference, that gap between the 14 days and that 585 seconds, and how can we start to target that, and how do we start to really look at that. So I wanted to do one quick survey here before we get into the next slide, which I think is going to pop up here shortly. So what I want everyone to do is just think about your own organizations, think about your own business in your own way. And if you had to kind of do a thumb wag guess at what you thought was the non-value added time in your business, what do you think that is? And I've given some broad percentages here for people to be able to fill out. So go ahead and fill that out. And you know, I'm interested to get a feeling from everybody where you think non-value added time exists in your organization, and just kind of get general sense from the group that's on the call here. So we'll just give everyone a couple seconds here to fill this out, and then we will go ahead and take a look at the results. It is a different way to look at things when we start looking at things from value add and non-value add, and what actually exists within our businesses. And when we start taking that lens on things, we start to get a different way of looking at things. I can tell everyone I was working on a process where there was, you know, it was taking about 60 or 70 days to produce something. And when we did the value analysis and when we looked at that value stream map, we realized that as much as it was taking 70 days to deliver, really what it was actually taking in processing time was only about 2 days. And so we saw a gap of about 68 days between what it was actually taking to deliver and what that processing time was. And that then becomes that gap that we need to then start to aim and target towards. Do we have the results of this survey? Oh, no, 5 more seconds. Sorry, I apologize. Should be coming up right now. So there we go. So, okay, so we have, you know, about 25% of the group in less than 25%. We have 60% of the group in 25 to 50, and then 14% of the group in 50 to 75%. So again, a variety of folks in different areas. I think that's excellent. Even you know, those folks that acknowledge where that waste exists or where there's not value. That's always a great step, because once you acknowledge that there's some opportunity, then you can move forward from there. So just to kind of put that into perspective, here are some things that we've seen in industries. And I can tell you that as much as these percentages are, you know, 65, 59, 70, 68%, I can come up with numerous examples, and I know Jay also can on the phone, where we've seen examples of 90% of a process being non-value added, and yeah, so there is definitely opportunity and areas in industry where this is definitely applicable. And so, you know, again, it's not shocking for us to see these large amounts. It just becomes an opportunity to be able to improve. So I think I'll pass it over to Nicole now, and she's gonna pick up the next couple slides here.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, so, I think now that we have a sense of what we kind of are looking for, the question really becomes, well, how do we go and look for it? And it really starts with defining the problem. So, I think we can sort of run around in various paths looking for a problem, but if you can really, and to try and figure out what the solution is, but it's really in defining and spending some really good time defining that problem is really key. And and I think the quote there says it fairly well, that if you can define it correctly, you're almost there. And so as we wanted to give you some things to think about when you're looking to define a problem. And so when we want to that critical definition, you want to contemplate the various kinds of areas that you might want to look in your business. So is there a particular area or an issue that is giving you a cause for concern? What's arising to the forefront that sort of gives you a signal that there's a problem? There might be a situation that needs to be improved, either with, people or process, in this case, certainly process. Is there a snag or a delay that needs to be eliminated? So if you think about the various kinds of processes that your business does, whether it's sort of in a manufacturing setting, or if you're, building roof trusses, or if you are, if you have a canning line, or those kinds of things, you want to be able to identify within those places what's getting in your way of being able to be efficient and effective. There might be something else that you're trying to address, but ultimately you're feeling a symptom of something that is a bit of a challenge, something that's a problem that you're recognizing needs to be solved. One thing to mention is that it's great to come up with a problem statement. So actually, like, the words around what is it that is my problem that I'm going to try and solve for. And as we're doing that exercise, I think human nature is that we sort of want to try to solve it immediately. And as a consultant and as a problem solver, it's part of my job. So it's sort of hard to kind of pull myself back and say, you know what, let's just come up with what is the actual problem. I don't want to attribute blame to that. I'm definitely trying to avoid solutions because I don't want to presuppose what the answer might be. And then in addition to that, using some data, use some good solid information, that baseline, that understanding of this is a reflection of what's actually happening. Our guts are good, but data is better. So one of the ways that we want to be able to really start to understand our problems is to start to think about to dig down and to conduct some root cause analysis. And so as we move into that part, that's one of the tools. So root cause analysis, Robert, can I ask you to switch the slides, please? So once we go into root cause analysis, it's, I think we've all seen this iceberg picture somewhere along the way. We're pretty familiar with it. We recognize that 90% of that iceberg is floating under the water. And so really what we're saying is that we're only seeing the 10%. And so when you're seeing and feeling a problem in your business, that's probably what you're seeing is a very small portion of what's actually happening and what's bothersome in your organization. And so what we really want to be able to do is dive in under the water and have a look to be able to find out what is that true root cause of what it is that is taking place in your organization. It's good to have the symptoms to come and tell you there's a problem, but you really got to be able to understand it. And it's interesting because one of the best ways to know one of the ways that we can arrive there is to get into the 5 whys. And so this is a tool, it's a technique. There are many others, but it is a way to sort of start to get at some of these root cause analysis. This is an example, a live example of it's in use. And so there was a stone memorial. It was deteriorating really quickly, and it was showing significant signs of wear. And so the question was, well, why do we have to clean it so often? And so in asking why multiple times, 5 is the trick. In asking why 5 times, you can start to really dig in and understand a little bit more about what is that root cause of what's taking place. So in this case, the question was, why is the stone deteriorating? Well, it was deteriorating because there was a lot of it was being cleaned a lot by high pressure washers every 2 weeks. Why were we washing it every 2 weeks? Well, there was a large amount of bird droppings on it. It was a popular place for the birds. So it needed to be cleaned regularly. So why were there so many birds? Well, there was a lot of spiders that were around that food, and that's the food for the birds. And so, of course, clearly they, they're going to follow where their food goes. But why were there so many spiders is the fourth why. Well, they were attracted to the high-powered lights that were shining down on the monument during the evenings. And so, well, why were the lights on? Well, they were on a schedule, and that schedule was being turned on. Those lights were being turned on 2 hours before sunset, and they were being turned off 2 hours after sunrise. So in the end, they ended up fixing up the schedule for the lights so that it would have a shorter time frame, shorter time for the spiders to be attracted, and then it cascades up to the birds. And really what happened was they were able to shrink that time, reduce the level of impact of the spiders and therefore the birds, and then able to deal with an easier job with cleaning the memorial. Now, one thing to mention, of course, is that in this case, they were able to identify very specifically what the problem was. So remember when I mentioned you could turn it on and off? In this case, literally, you could turn on the lights on and off and determine and help impact what the problem and the solution would be. So you could have, they could have stopped at, the birds are the problem, let's put up netting. But in that case, we would not have dealt with that really core problem, that root cause of it actually being from the lights and the spiders. So that's my example. Beyond that, I think it's now time to chat about performance measures, and I'm going to pass it over to Jay.
Sure, thank you, Nicole and Robert. So performance measure, if you recall in the early slides that Robert mentioned the performance measurement, and in our experience, performance measurement is a key component of any performance improvement initiative. And you only can improve what you know and what you measure, and you know how much you want to improve and where you want to improve. So it's drive your improvement directions and focus on what's important for your business. What we highlighted here are the four key considerations when you're building a solid performance measure, not only for performance improvement initiatives, projects, but also for your day-to-day operational management. Usually the performance measurement start with, when you're setting up a performance measurement, start with have a clear strategy to measure what's most important. Our experience is your performance measurements are changing over the time. You want to focus on what is at the time your strategic objectives. So either you grow your business, so you might want to measure your market penetration, how profit the market and product development towards your business, or you're in the business that it's highly commoditized, and you want to look at a cost, you want to look at a cost reduction, you want to look at a profit margin, you want to drive your business. So, and also another key component of setting up a performance measure is don't set up too many performance measures. If you have read a book about From a Good to Great, a great company, there's a 5 component. One of the key component is if you can identify 1 or 2 measures that in your organization, you can drive your successes, not at the senior management owner level, but also at the staff level. They will provide a significant a growth strategy and a drive from an organizational improvement perspective. The second key consideration is to look at KPIs, the actual measurement itself. Not only you want to focus on what we call the lagging indicators. So those are the ones that many of you probably measure today. You want to know your profitability by month end, by quarter end, by year end. What's my cost structure? What's my inventory level? And how profit it is, what my market penetration. So those are the lagging indicators. The leading indicators are the measures that close to your operations. What's my inventory level on a day-to-day basis? What's my lead time? Is any shortage going on? What is my shift by shift productivity, line by line? What's my profitability of my products at an individual product level? And how well every employee is performing at a different time. Understanding that, you will see the trend probably 2 to 3 months down the road, understanding that maybe something can go wrong. So measures, those are critical. That's also leading to, we call it visualization. Visualization is not only the graphic charts you see as owners and senior managers in the organization, but also the measures are relevant to your staff. We see a lot of leading practices that you actually post specific measures for a production line, for inventory area. The reason you're doing that is the old saying is what get measured get done. It's true. Actually, once you set a measure in where the staff can see, where they can see how shift by shift the performance is, and how the warehouse is managed, inventory level is performing, you actually can see 10 to 20% improvement just by setting up the right measure. And the staff can see every day. You actually can go down there, talk to staff every day about those measures. And so that will bring a significant effects as well. The last is the measurement need to drive the improvement. So the one of the key reasons the measurement exists is drive the continuous improvement. So staff can look at them and improve them and every day. The reason I mentioned a couple of times about the measurement relevant to staff as well is, if you recall during the first survey, 30% of you said that you're too busy to improve. And often that means that as owners, as business managers, we're too busy to improve. So the right improvement is at the staff level. So if we can enable the staff and through the measurement system, through the sound foundations, and through some education, and the continuous improvement will become part of everybody's job. That's where the key success is for any type of improvement. If we can go to the next slide. So as Robert and Nicole mentioned, we have been doing performance improvement in across many industries, subsectors within the private enterprise, from food and beverage to manufacturing, oil, gas, forestry, real estate construction, and some of the financial service, the insurance company as well. We're bringing 2 case studies, and we're working with a company from less than $100,000 revenue. I remember one of them are a small 3 employee operations. It's just start up. They're building the cake in the jar, and they want to double their production from 400 jars to 900 to meet their market requirement. And also the upside of the size of the organization from $300 to $500 million number of clients across different provinces, regions as well in Canada. So this is a typical example is a carpet flooring distributor and a retailer. It is a family-owned business, have been successful for the last many years. They focus on specific area for they consider as primary suppliers for flooring products. They have been growing quite extensively, especially given COVID in the last 2 years. We probably all know that a lot of families, a lot of individuals start focus on home innovation, providing a unique situation for the business. So they look at it to maintain the healthy growth, but at the same time to be competitive, gain market share, and to be profitable as well as part of their growth. The area they want to focus on as part of this is their inventory management. If you recall a couple of slides back for the waste, inventory is one of the waste. And we know that if we hold too much inventories, it's a cost to the business. It creates obsolescence potentially. And often it's clouded your warehouse and supply chain, and often actually cause shortages as well for some products as well. So it's actually, it's kind of double side of sword for any business. Our MMP team actually have a proprietary inventory management and analysis tool that we applied in this typical example. We start with analyze at the product level, how profitable they are, what their demand pattern, and what their high mover and the slow mover, and we'll use that to categorize by take inventory categorized in different categories, so we can develop different supply chain strategy. We also can look at transportation and logistics. In this case, one of the solution is in the area for maximize the container purchasing. So reduce the cost and maximize usage of container when shipping out. We also can look at auto fulfillment to match the demand to the orders. So and to make sure there's no unfulfilled orders, so you capture all the demand in your supply chain as well. And creating a dash, and a part of the tool itself is creating a dashboards and ongoing reporting as well from an inventory supply chain perspective. And that preparatory tool will become a product basically for this example, and a link to their ERP system and some of the manual data input system. So the specific client actually take on for their future day-to-day operation as well. So you saw the benefits. The initial benefits is the $400,000 savings from inventory reduction and capture unfulfilled orders. ROI for the initial stage for the first 4 months is about a 2 to 1. And it's continue to grow as the organization learn how to use the tool and then become the day-to-day operations. We'll go to the next slide.
You know what, Jay? Just so that we can maybe leave some time for questions, I might skip the next case so that we can make sure that we have time for questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Thanks. I like your passion.
Absolutely. So one of the things I think there was a question surrounding how we can support you. So we have a standard approach that we take when it comes to looking at improvement within your organization. Really kind of starting at an initial analysis of the organization, which gives us a detailed list of prioritization of opportunities, to then be able to put that into an implementation plan, and then ultimately kind of that post-implementation of making sure that that we've done the right things, that we've hit the right metrics, that we are tracking the right things, and that it's been effective, and that it's actually achieved what we wanted it to achieve ultimately along the way, with really, as you can see at the very bottom there, some of the outcomes being financial improvements, growth, solving complex business challenges, and even project program management as well. So ultimately, we really kind of want people to try to get started as quick as possible. You know, we use a quote at the end here: "A bad system will beat a good person every time." And that is very true from Deming, who really kind of started improvement many years ago. And so, you know, again, building that process, making sure we have the right processes is really critical to really the success of any organization. And so I think at this point, I think we'll start. I think we've already got some questions in here that we can start to answer. So I know we have a question here that says, what are tools that we can use to move us from reactive to proactive, less firefighting and more process driven? So I really think Jay kind of touched on that with the metrics and with leading and lagging indicators. And so, you know, if we're more focused on those lagging indicators, we're going to be a little bit more firefighting. Whereas if we can get more to those leading indicators of what's driving our process, ideally we can actually catch errors, catch issues as they're happening or as they're occurring, and then really be able to prevent that issue from moving through our system. Because as an issue moves through a process or moves through a system, it gets bigger and more expensive. And so the sooner and quicker that we can capture that issue and resolve that issue, the cheaper and easier it is ultimately right up front to be able to solve that. I hope that does answer that question. Another one that we have here are what areas of efficiency should I target first? Where to focus limited resources on improving performance? So I hate to go back to the same answer previously, but I think, again, this comes down to metrics and making sure that you're measuring things, because if you're measuring things, then you can start to prioritize what needs to be done and where that needs to be done first. Every organization is going to have constraints on resources and time and all those kinds of things. And so absolutely being able to apply those resources in an appropriate way is really critical. And so if you can measure the right things and tie it to whatever your strategic plan is, whatever your long-term goals are, and those measurements are tied and linked to that, then you can be sure that the things that you're working on are driving towards your long-term plans and your long-term goals from that standpoint. Okay, sorry, I'm just clicking through some of these. Jay or Nicole, I don't know if you had any questions you wanted to answer there. I'm just looking through some of them right now.
Yeah, maybe I can answer a few. I just saw a few of them. I think one of the questions is, would this webinar be considered value added? That's a very interesting question. And so it's actually two answers. It depends. It's not because we're consultants. We always use that word dependent. It depends. If this webinar is not resulting to performance process improvement activity in your organization, I would consider it's non-value added. It's a time and the effort from you, and you probably can do something more valuable than sitting through this webinar, listen to three of us. Certainly, if that results to even one thing you do back in your organization, it's a value-added result into any improvement. So it's a good question, and a lot of things. Actually, performance improvement itself is not value added if there's no results at the end, right? Because it's a cost, time, and money. It's not free. There's no free performance improvement, even just you do yourself. You need the time and effort from your end as well. Another question I picked from here is, it's a much bigger question. I don't think any one of us can answer, but I will give a try. What tips do you have for efficiency with an unstable supply chain? As I said, all three of us don't have a silver bullet. I don't know if anybody else have a silver bullet for unstable supply chain. We cannot control what we cannot control. We can control what we can. So my experience is for unstable supply chain, regardless of the result of a COVID or in a normal situation, like 2 years before, 2 years ago, couple of things you can do. First, understand your supply chain. For instance, understand your suppliers, their lead times. Lead time changes on the real time. Has indicators of any delays could happen. So you can react in a more prompt fashion rather than at the mercy of a supply chain itself. So I think probably as a Robert, go back to the measurement and set up the right measure. Measure your suppliers and has constantly information about your suppliers and about your market conditions. Stay on top of it. At the same time, another thing you can look inside of your operation is, can you make your operation, we call it agile operations. So you produce smaller batches, so you now produce a large inventories, and suddenly your market condition changes. You can, and you also, or there's not enough inventories coming to your way. So make your production more effective, more agile, and you can produce a smaller batch and at the lower cost. Because often that when you produce one thing in our mind is produce a larger batch, will have a lower cost because the volume cost of a volume. But that's another thing you want to look into is that larger batch is less responsive to unstable supply chain. Maybe I'll hand over to Nicole, see if anything from Nicole want to answer. I have one or two I can answer as well, but maybe Nicole, we have 6 minutes left. So
yeah, well, yeah, no, for sure. There's a lot of great questions in the chat. Yeah. I'm glad to see it, and I'm a little worried we're going to run out of time. I'm going to start off with one of the questions around leading KPIs for small businesses, and then how to communicate that. Or sorry, no, I was going to let that one was going to be for Robert. I'll come to the biggest challenge when you're doing implementation of improvements, and how to tackle resistance. That's a question from Anish. And so I think I'll start off and Robert can backfill with other comments and thoughts he might have. You know, I think one of the pieces that's really important when you're talking about doing this kind of work is to really involve the people that are doing the work. So, you know, it's one thing for management and owners to recognize that there's value in doing this kind of work. And certainly you need that sponsorship and the approval and the desire from that group to be able to move these kinds of things forward. But fundamentally, you know, a very core principle in change management is to certainly involve the people that are doing the work. So when Robert talks about being on the floor, doing it with the people that are doing the work, being where the process is taking place is really critical. It allows people to participate. It gives them a voice. It gives folks an opportunity to say, this is what I think the problem might be. And in many cases, our team members and our employees already know, or they at least have a sense. They may not know how to solve it. They may not know how to calculate it, but there's generally going to be a sense from that group of people who are able to help weigh in. So that also in turn and naturally just helps to deal with some of that resistance that you might suffer from as you're trying to implement some of these changes. So the more that you can involve your staff along the way and have folks understand what's going on, give them a role around clarity, and tell them what's happening and how it's going to happen and get them involved along the way. Those would be my sort of people side recommendations on that front. Robert, did you have what else did you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think that you really nailed it. There's not an exact percentage, but if I kind of throw something out there, I would say probably 30% of success is actually based on the solution, and the other 70% is based on actually engaging people in change management and doing all the right things there. And the phrase that I've always used from the beginning is communicate often and communicate early. And constant communication and constant involvement, and a lot less telling and more working with to come up with solutions and answers, and really trying to find those things that get in people's way to do the job. Because if you can get rid of those things that get in people's way, those are the easy things that they want to get rid of. And they'll be more than happy to help you with that. The other one that I was going to answer here real quickly, and then I know that Jay, I think you had one you wanted to answer. It was just KPIs for small business and how to communicate those KPIs. So KPIs for every business are going to be different and unique depending on your business, depending on your strategic goals, depending on your metrics. Obviously, everyone's going to have profitability somewhere in their KPIs. That is likely going to be a goal in everyone's. But again, that's that lagging indicator. You really want to get to those leading indicators as to what's predicting your profitability, what's going to drive that from that standpoint. And then ultimately how to communicate KPIs. You know, it can be as easy as a sheet of paper on the wall and a marker writing it down. You don't have to get highly technical on these things. There are lots of systems that can be used to do it, but you can use Post-it notes and a sheet of paper as well. Really, the key is starting, and you'll start to learn as you go along whether you have the right KPIs or not.
Yep.
I was just going to say that we should probably wrap up. We could probably go for another half hour, but Jay, do you want to take us home with how to be in touch and proposals and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so you saw our name here, and where our focus is. So certainly 3 of us will be your touch points. If you have any needs and any questions, certainly we're looking forward to connect with you. And as Robin mentioned, certainly we can help you to start your improvement journey if you haven't started yet. I saw one of a question about, we have a system for the implementation program. We use a system called a C-Learn Do. One thing we didn't highlight, I think we will highlight not to speak a lot in terms of, besides the improvement approach, we also, as education is a part of our overall approach as well. So we not only help you to start the improvement program, maybe do the first project with you, so setting the successes and generating the benefits. You actually, the cost benefit will pay for itself from an improvement perspective, but also at the same time, your staff and even yourself, we're working alongside with us. We have a training program for you. You actually can continue doing that. And improvement is about a continuous improvement, right? It's not a flavor of the month, a flavor of the year. So certainly we're looking forward to hear from you. Any specific questions that you posted here we didn't answer, you can write an email to us as well. We certainly want to answer that to you as well. So yeah, we're just a short of time today. So thank you very much. And certainly it's our pleasure to spend the last 60 minutes with you. And hopefully you can get as much out of this and the start of your improvement journey.
Andrew, I think was there one more survey for everyone for anybody who wanted to be contacted and so forth?
There you go. If you're interested in being contacted, please do feel free to fill out this survey. And then we will do our best to get back to you reasonably promptly. And thanks very much for your time. And we'll look forward to the next time our paths cross.
Thanks, everyone.